Welcome once again to the White Owl Reports, and I'm your host, Michael Edward. Today, continuing on with our special series with Harry Hubbard of IllinoisCaves.com. Today's part 8. Every week just gets more and more exciting. All the previous discoveries of the artifacts that have come out of the Illinois Caves, or more accurately, the Illinois Tomb. And as Harry has said in our previous parts of the series, the lost tomb of Alexander the Great. Yep, sounds absurd, but that's what the tablets that have come out of this particular cave are showing, and we've discussed a lot of that already. Today, we're going to get in even more on the artifacts, which are pictured. The majority of what Harry will always talk about during this series, and has, is pictured at IllinoisCaves.com. We're also featuring films that he had done back in mid-'90s, presentations that he and his partner in all this discovery, Paul Schaffranke, fantastic linguistic translator who has broken the code, so to speak. And we've discussed all that already, so go check the past programs, but videos are on there, pictures, more than you can look at in a day. It's unbelievable. Every time I go on there, I find another little hidden spot, or it seems hidden, but they're all there. More pictures, more artifacts, just amazing. It's something to really absorb, something to get into, and if you want to find out what real history is all about, spend some time at IllinoisCaves.com. All right, well, I know Harry's on here with us, and Harry, I wanted to get into artifacts a little bit more to coincide with what you've put in your videos and pictures. You have some kind of odd artifacts in there, Harry. They're not things that I've seen on National Geographic, let's put it that way. Maybe the dolphins and the whales that we talked about last week a little bit, the horses. But you've got ships in there. You've got some things, I think you call them ritual stones, which I look at them as religious tablets of some type. Let's talk about them.
Well, dolphins are in a big presence on these artifacts. Dolphins go from the gold medallions to the black stones to the marble artifacts. There's dolphins everywhere. And how often would you find dolphins depicted on artifacts in such an artistic manner in the middle of the state of Illinois? It's not too common. And but there are a lot of presence with dolphins. And let me, apologize. I'm a little hoarse this week because I'm getting over a cold. But there's also a lot of whales. There's three-dimensional statues of whales. There's small carvings of whales. And some of them actually appear to be different species of whales. Now, how in the world these people, these ancient artisans, got to see these whales and carve them, they obviously knew that they blew air and water out of their spouts, or snouts, however you want to pronounce it, and they must have seen them washed up on the shores in different places to carve them so accurately on these stones.
Did you have a translation?
There's even scientific types of data. There's one of the stones that Paul deciphered called the Bellina tablet. And it talks about, it's got a whale smiling down at the bottom of it. And so he kind of was perplexed with that, whale smiling. And the decipherment was, it's on, I think, the Isaac excerpts, is not only do whales make sounds when mating, but actually beach themselves ending their travels. Well, that's why, evidently, the whale is smiling. He's been mating. So, which is,
well, that makes sense.
yeah, kind of comical, but kind of scientific also. And there are many statues, bas-reliefs, many of the artifacts on the marble and on the black stone, the lavanya. The carving itself is lifted out of the stone. In other words, it's not carved directly into the stone, but the medium around the depiction, the artwork, is taken down, which is a different process of carving. It's quite unique and quite well executed. Some of these artifacts are just absolutely fantastic. And when you look at a picture, sometimes it's hard to tell whether they're carved in relief or carved down into the stone. So anyone perusing the website with hundreds of pictures on there, bear that in mind. Some of them are carved into the stone, and some of them are actually lifted out of the stone. And there's men, women, there's naked people in certain on certain stones. There's animals ready to mate. There's gods depicted in mating positions and stuff like this that are quite unique in character and quite well executed. It just runs all over the place there. And as far as the statues go, there's full animal statues, front, back, and all around. There's birds like chickens. There's heads of people, heads of women, heads of men, warriors. It just goes on and on. There's a plethora of daggers. And the daggers that are shown, or that I have pictures of and that I have held in my own hands, they are polished just incredibly well, just like glass. And some people in the past have called it a diorite, which is a stone evidently native to Egypt. And it's very glass-like in character, and when it polishes up, it's just absolutely beautiful. It's kind of got white, gray, and black embedded in the stone, different colors. And the ones I've held, they couldn't have, the edges aren't sharp enough to cut anything. So, and they're quite fragile, so they must have been used as trophies, prizes, gifts, rituals. We're not sure. We don't know, but they've got the handle on them. Some of them, they all fit into the hand very nicely. It's not like you get very small ones like a pocket knife. They're all like maybe 10 inches to a foot long with a nice grippy handle on them. There's also all kinds of tools and smaller utensils, many items that we don't know what they are. There's some kind of utensil for maybe rolling out some kind of food or grinding some kind of grain, or used as a cooking implement of some sort, and they are made of a different type of stone. I haven't recognized any other types of utensils that are similar to these, so that field is wide open for someone to make their own discoveries concerning what these utensils were used for. They could have been, my theory is, if you have an artifact and you don't know what it is, you don't know what its purpose was, you have no clue what it is, chances are it was a child's toy. It's the only thing that makes sense to me sometimes. A lot of artifacts from Mexico that the experts couldn't figure out what they were. Before we got involved with this, I just determined that they were some kind of kid's toy. And it kind of fit. It could be used for this and for that, entertainment. And we discussed in one show the river maps that of the Mississippi showing, and the Ohio River basins, where they show the Wabash River, Illinois River, and several different large rivers here in this country, very similar as they appear in modern-day times, but there are also other river systems depicted on the stones. Rivers from Europe, very well detailed, and there are stones that appear to be some type of architectural, structural formulas in some respect. I know there are a couple of stones that show how a ship is built. I don't have any of them, I think, on my web page, but the way a ship is built, and that's one way how you can determine a fake artifact is, like a ship. There were some artifacts bouncing around in the Soper Savage plates that showed a ship from the bottom up, just halfway built. And this is, it was immediately determined a fake because you build a ship with the ribs of the hull complete first, and then you put the sides on it. You don't start at the bottom and just put up boards and then put the ribs down inside it.
No.
The certain way a ship is built, and that's what some of these stones depict, along with...
It starts with a keel, Harry, and then they put the ribs with the keel, and then you do the planking. And it's still done that way with wood ships.
Yes, exactly. So that was something that really caught our eye. And then several of the other ship stones give port of exit, port of entry, something about the journey, who was on the ship, what they had, what they carried with them, certain supplies. And it's all right there in the text of the ship. I mean, on the ship stones.
Wow.
And many of these stones, the ancient artisans put as much script as they could fit into the open space around the actual picture. And this is one of the key elements, I'll reiterate this, the key elements of how Paul was able to break a lot of this script is by looking for the slang words of the action and within the picture, and the actual subject, the topic of that carving, and then looking for these words.
You know, Harry, last week we were talking about the horses, and I was mentioning that there were different styles of how the horses were dressed, so to speak, how their manes were done, and the shapes of the horse's head. So obviously we're not talking about just one particular time in history with many of these tablets. The horses show different times. The ships seem to show that to me as well. Different styles and different designs of the ships that are on these tablets. So would I be wrong in saying a lot of these artifacts are covering different centuries in history with different nations, so to speak, different peoples, whether they be Greek or Egyptian or whatever, because they each had slightly different unique styles in how they would build their ships, dress their ships, and the same thing with their horses. So, am I off on that? Because I'm noticing these differences in your pictures with these artifacts.
No, correct. And the horse is another one of the animals that transcends from one stone to the next as far as composition. You have them in marble, you have them in sandstone, you have them in this white stone, real fine-grained type of limestone. So that is another one. See, one of the things that Paul and I noticed after working with the artifacts for several months is that certain types of script were indicative to certain types of stone. Most of the marble stones, for instance, are carved with a North Libyan type of script. The black stone has the Phoenician type, Latin type characters intermeshed. And there are certain stones, though, that have the Latin characters, the Punic characters, and also Egyptian glyph characters, and they describe, like, for instance, a Greek god all over the place. And so without the knowledge of these ancient languages, the layman is going to be, like, scratching his head, pulling his hair out. And there are other artifacts that clearly are some type of star charts. These people did know the Big Dipper. They knew different constellations, and these tablets clearly show star patterns in some form, and some of them haven't been deciphered, so we're not sure whether that stone describes that particular time of year, or if it's discussing what particular season it was, meaning did they plant their crops, did they harvest their crops, which back in the old days they didn't have a calendar on the wall that they could look at. They looked at the stars. And there are many, while I'm on celestials, many artifacts depicting the moon, phases of the moon, as well as the sun in different artifacts. And they are quite interesting. And then, of course, you have your ritual stones, death stones, sacrificial stones, on this spot we did this, a ritual from Terribulus, a ritual from here, a ritual from there, a certain this, a certain that, and praise be to the God so-and-so. Blessings be upon me because I did this and I was the priest of that. You'll have like a man, he is the priest of this. This guy's the priest of this. And while I'm at that also, there are several stones that are carvings, portraits of women, girls, and they're absolutely gorgeous. They're beautiful. One of my favorites was used in the Ancient American magazine. I said, this girl is beautiful, even though she's carved on an ugly black rock. If you walked in the room, you would be able to see her. Of course, now she doesn't have a top on, but her face and her body, she's quite pretty. And now, 2,000 years later, she's immortalized in magazines and on web pages, and people can go and look at her, you know, say, wow, she's gorgeous, you know. And girl's probably early 20s, late teens or something, we don't know. And we're not sure who that girl is. But evidently someone thought she was important enough to carve her likeness into a black stone. And that particular stone is just a carving. It's not a bas-relief. So quite interesting. And one of the stones actually says Lucia, which Lucia is an Italian word for a woman which also means light. Basically, Lucia, wife of Helios. So it was evidently a wife of many, or the singular, we don't know, of Helios. Lucia, light married to Helios. That was pretty neat. And then there are some tablets that are just loaded with script, front and back. And the script, as you hold it one way, it'll read up from the middle of the stone to the top of the stone, up. And then to get it correctly oriented, you have to turn the stone over and then read it from the middle up again. So it's written in two different directions on the same stone. Why they did that, we don't know. But some of them are combat records of ancient wars actually fought here on North American soil. There's also combat records of wars fought in Julius Caesar's time. And just absolutely fascinating that the scholars that are going to call poo-poo on this are going to, one day have to shape up and look at it and say, holy cow, these guys had it right. They had it right 20 years ago, and we didn't listen to them. They did their homework.
Well, there's no doubt all these carvings are from exceptional mariners. I mean, these people probably used the star charts that were even carved. That was their navigation. Lots of history has shown that. They knew the dolphins and the whales because, they're depicting that, and it could have been the stonecutters that were on the ships. I have this theory after looking at all these things that you've got on the site and speaking with you that I would think there must have been a northern route somehow, that they came into North America from the north down the Hudson. I don't know. Maybe there's a river that history has deleted out of the pages, so to speak. But it seems obvious to me that if they were seeing the whales and the dolphins, I would think for sure they were going through the Caribbean or at least in the Gulf of Mexico. And we do have in history that shows, and of course we're talking about Mississippi River too, and we do have things like the mounds that are in Mississippi and such that back up that theory. So obviously what was found in the caves, my point here, Harry, was they used star charts for navigation. They knew exactly where they were. It wasn't any mistake. Apparently, from some of the things you've spoken about before, they had trade going back to the Mediterranean where so many things prove of the different societies there again, the horses and all that, all pointing to the Mediterranean or the desert horses of North Africa, Libya, what we call it now, and Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they must have gone back and forth. Didn't you have one carving where it was actually from a stone cutter, and he was basically saying that he was a stone cutter, and wasn't that about whales or something? I'm trying to remember.
It was on whalebone. That's at the very end of the Etruscan Volume 1 video, the Numerius tablet. It gives name, date, time, and place. Wow. And
it ended up in southern Illinois.
Found in southern Illinois. And these people obviously knew about the Canary Islands. There is speak from some ancient records concerning the Canary Islands, even Pliny talking about King Yuba, and they're given King Yuba in some of the literary works of today, scholarly books, academia, gives King Yuba II credit for the discovery of the Canary Islands. It's hard for me to substantiate that because I'm kind of biased, but I can't really go by all of what they say, but there have been ancient buildings found on the Canary Islands, and that would be a stopover. But the Canary Islands aren't too far from the mainland coast of Africa, and you can. I think there's one of those volcanoes there that goes up past 11,000 feet ASL, and you would be able to see that. If you've ever been out on the ocean, you can see skyscrapers or tall buildings from a very far distance. If you have a clear day with not a lot of surf spray. So evidently, you just get off the coast of Africa just a few miles, and you'd be able to see the volcano cones from the Canary Islands. So given that with the combat records, it's just fascinating. And those, though, don't have pictures involved with them. So those were the most difficult for Paul to break, and because it's just text. And then you have to, first of all, figure out where does the text start. And speaking these words phonetically, going 1, 2, 3 letters, 4 characters at a time, and then determining it. That's one thing that the Etruscan Volume 1 video shows is how Paul busted the script. And that's what makes it so interesting to me. Even though I made the props, I filmed it, and I was amazed with it.
Well, yeah. What amazes me is some of these are written right to left, or they start at the bottom and go up, and then go down the center row, and then come up the other. You had some names for it, one of the first shows in the series, but not all of them are the same.
It's called Bostrafeeden, the way of the ox plow.
Right. Well, and that shows not all of them were exactly that same way. Some were different. So we're looking at tablets with inscriptions and writings and pictures that are showing 2,000 years ago and before. And that's the thing that just grabs me is this is more of a history book than what we've been taught. Just looking at these stones and Paul's amazing figuring all this out and the translations, wow, it just blows me away, Harry. And you guys were doing this in the mid-'90s, and
Correct.
We're cracking all this. In fact, you had made films, which are on your site, IllinoisCaves.com. You did that before you even got involved very much with the Illinois Caves, the Tomb of Alexander the Great. You didn't even know that yet, but you were still doing the maps and showing how North America was not discovered by Columbus. It was obvious.
Well, there are many artifacts also that show really nice graphic patterns, artwork similar to what we would see perhaps in the American Southwest pottery. Just fantastic linear and nonlinear graphics, proportionate angles, decorative artifacts that seem to serve no purpose whatsoever. And at the end of the Photo Show 2 video, that was, I guess, the first one that our producer put online, Artifacts from Alexander's Tomb, where I'm just sitting down one night, showing the video, talking into a microphone, and explaining what these artifacts are. There, at the end of it, is a marble baton. I had purchased that marble baton in winter of 1995, and I brought it back down to Florida, and Paul examined it, spent several days with it, and he noticed, he said, several of these letters are backwards. They're like mirror, not just backwards, but inverted. They're a reverse image. And so what we did is I went and bought a bunch of modeling clay, flattened out the modeling clay, rolled it out, and boom, there it was. It was written in a zigzag fashion, and it all came together. Paul's theory was correct. And what he could see was that, I can't remember exactly what it was. It goes, as I have promised you, I am sending you this song for you to sing on the steps of the Odes for your birthday. So it's actually like a birthday card, and it appears to be from Helios to his sister, Cleopatra Selene. And then coming to find out, there are other graphic stones that you roll them out, and the graphic is inverted. And evidently this was a common form of communication 2,000 years ago, where a messenger would have like the artifact or the message baton with him, and he would have some dirt, some special dirt. When he got to his destination, he would mix the dirt with a little bit of water, make a real mud putty clay, flatten out the clay, and roll the baton out, and boom, there was your message. And it would be intended for whoever that message was intended. And the funny thing about that marble baton on the greeting card, in the middle of it, there appeared to be something we didn't understand at first. And I think it was Paul's idea that it possibly could have been some type of musical intonation, some kind of musical notes, some kind of symbols to be reproduced with some type of instrument, specific instrument. So that was something that was really fantastic.
Harry, let's just take a real quick break because I can hear you sniffling. I know you got a bad cold, so let's just take about 3 minutes here. Go try to clear some of that out because you sound like you
I'll
need
plug it up.
Yeah, plug it up, Harry. All right, we'll be back in about 3.5 minutes.
Informed, enlightened, alive and amplified. This is the Living Light Network.
Well, you're listening to White Owl Reports, Michael Edward, and today is part 8. Yeah, we've gone that far with Harry Hubbard, Lost Tomb of Alexander the Great. It's been amazing. Every week, more and more information, more details, and just go to Harry's site, IllinoisCaves.com. And not everything that he's got is up there, but there's so much you'll be keeping yourself occupied a lot. So I've got Harry back on here. Well, Harry, let's pick up where we were. There was something, you've got so much out there. I have to remember what's what. Didn't you have in either one of your videos on one of the stones what was translated talking about Moses?
Yes. He's called Osiris, which is his Egyptian name, his true Egyptian name. So a lot of the scholars that go Moshiai, and this and that, it's all truly concocted. And it was recorded in Manetho that his name was Osiris. And he led a band of Hyksos out of Egypt. There has been videos or shows on the History Channel of people attempting to track down the trail of the Exodus. A lot of it is good, some of it's speculation. It's just hard to pin down something that happened 4,500 years ago. Where was that road at? Did the street go this? It's hard enough to figure out, here in America where a road went back in the 20s and the 30s, from old maps.
Especially with rivers
big task.
Course. Rivers change course. 40 years can make a lot of difference. Imagine 4,500.
Yes. And so my hat's off to these researchers that do go outside the box and attempt to track down certain trails or roads of travel and through passes and through the deserts. It's quite remarkable what they come up with.
Okay, Harry.
And even sea routes the same way. Even though it's out on the ocean, sometimes a sea route is easier to locate and determine because you've got more area. You kind of know point A and point B, and how they got there was pretty generalized.
And
but
now
on
you've
land,
got the star charts. They carved out their star charts as well.
There are many of these stones that we discussed it, just touched on it in one of the previous episodes, that have what appear to be an indexing system on it, numerical indexing system, which appears to be of Phoenician origin, because we find these artifacts from Carthage, even from Sicily, from Italy, Corsica, Sardinia, different places, Spain, and they depict some kind of measurement or numbering system. One of the stones says territories of Helios, and this is a series of lines, and many of the stones have a series of lines on the front and the back. We don't have a clue what they mean, and it's wide open. Somebody that's more knowledgeable about that. It is not Ogham, not even close. There may be an inscription, a descriptive text, and then a series of these lines, and then the text picks up again. And even though we have the text, we still haven't been able to nail down what these index lines mean.
It could be population for different territories or tax roll or something.
There are hundreds of them, hundreds of these stones that are covered with these lines. And you may have text on the front of the tablet, and on the back of it is just several dozens of these lines of numerical systems of something, whether it's cataloging, population, taxes. Gosh, who knows? We don't know.
One of the mysteries yet to be solved.
Yes, and getting back to some of the tablets with the script concerning death and tragedy, certain of the stones will describe a great tragedy, very sad situation, and then it says something like this happened in Happy Land, which is kind of oxymoronic. That tragedy happened in Happy Land.
Sounds kind of odd.
Excuse me, for the land of million smiles. And so we found that peculiar, but it all made sense. All of these stones make sense. As I listen back to the interviews that I've done with you and interviews that I've done in the past, our story doesn't change. It doesn't change at all. I continue to relate the same scenarios, the same facts, in the same type of given order, even as we made more discoveries. So our first decipherment videos and historical recorded videos and presentations are still as current as the day we made them. Now, through the years, Paul has changed some of the grammatical context, like blessed be to the power, or sworn to the summit, or there are different combinations of words that can go a couple of different ways. And Paul does his best to put it in a syntax that is more poetic in English as time goes along. So even though he may go back, because let's say he does a decipherment of a stone, he wants to mow it over for at least a couple of weeks to get his word order correct, because what he used to say, what was it? He didn't want to be attacked and arrested by the grammar police. Because so many of the American scholars, if it's not in a perfect English syntax, they get all fussy. So he tries to get it as accurate without changing the meaning of the inscription, the ancient inscription. And so he is at liberty to do that because he is the one deciphering the tablet. And I think it's good. I used to perhaps you could leave it in its archaic sense, but he prefers not to do that. So, and which makes for a very remarkable type of decipherment and enhancing it. That's all he's doing is enhancing it. He's not changing anything. He's making it better, more understandable.
Bringing it to our understanding in our current language, which how much have so many different languages, they've become archaic, not spoken anymore. I mean, just modern Latin. But then you go into ancient Latin and everything else. So, I appreciate what Paul has been doing, trying to polish it up.
And true, because let's say he makes a decipherment that concerning a couple of towns or a king's name or something, then he'll go back in the classical history books and find and read some about that particular king or that particular captain or that particular war and learn something from that book and then be able to make his decipherment more accurate.
Wow.
In a sense. And that's kind of what he did with the Etruscan Volume 1 video is on certain, like the Pergy tablets, after the decipherment is made, to be able to go back and find this in ancient history recorded in by the classical authors, and then be able to more accurately depict location, town, and certain keys. After he did the Etruscan Volume 1 video, he solved a 2,500-year-old murder mystery of what happened to a certain king.
Wow.
and that's just amazing. It's amazing because you have the decipherment there, and then we put it all together, and then here we are watching the video several months later, and then with reading and going back into classical history, he was able to put together an entire scenario that just made total sense.
Wow.
And it all worked, and it all fit, and it all fit with what happened later. So sometimes you need to know concerning a certain king or his wife or this or that. You have to look at what happened a couple of decades later that was recorded to go back and to get that accurate. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, you've got to look forward at the present of when things were written, and you have to look at what was written on it afterwards, and that's with a lot of things in history. Look, if it was that easy, Harry, that everybody could figure it out, well, then perhaps they could figure out the Dead Sea Scrolls or a lot of the Gnostic or Essene texts, which some of them were found in the Dead Sea caves and such. Hey, it's all a mystery, Harry. It all is, but you and Paul looked in some old writing, some old books, and you were a collector of old maps, and you guys just put a lot of stuff in there than Paul's linguistic abilities to translate these things. But let me bring up this point, Harry. It's not unique just to the Illinois caves. It's not unique to this particular cave that you call Lost Tomb of Alexander the Great. Other places they're finding some of the same things with some of the same script outside of what you found. Talk about that for a little while.
Well, Paul likes to call it Iberic because we find a lot of the same type of text on the old Spanish peninsula. Spain and Portugal were pretty much one land called Iberia, and that Iberic script is all over ancient Spain.
Well, was it also
when somebody sees Paul's decipherments, primarily Tomb Tape 4, Etruscan Volume 1, they can make their own type of lexicon concerning these alphabetical characters, and they can actually make decipherments from the Iberic tablets and Etruscan. See, we were going to make several videos of Etruscan Volume 2, Etruscan Volume 3, on and on. But Paul just said, well, if they can't grasp Etruscan Volume 1, why bother?
Well, that's a good point.
At the time, we weren't sure. Paul was deciphering these funeraries and all these tablets in Etruscan right and left. I mean, everything, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And we had enough material when we did Etruscan Volume 1 to make 3 videos. But he chose not to. Let's give it some time. And then he moved away, I moved away, and we just never got around to it. And perhaps one day we can make Etruscan Volume 2, because like he said, it's all right there. It's all right there in this Etruscan Volume 1 video. Anybody can do it now.
You have a challenge. You have a challenge on your site where you're showing one tablet, and you basically say to the people, "Go ahead. That was in a video. You know what all these symbols mean. Go ahead and translate it." Did you ever have anybody get back to you and say, "I know what that says," based on what Paul had taught?
Yes, but the contest that was on there was Egyptian glyph.
Oh, okay.
And if you translated that, we were going to send you our video packet and an Alexander Helios field cap. And there's a lot of people that say they know Egyptian glyph, and when it comes down to it, they don't. But all you need to decipher Egyptian glyph is the 2 Wallace Budge, Volume 1, Volume 2, Egyptian dictionaries. Now, and there's other good Egyptian books, but there was a man in Florida, Melbourne, Florida, who was self-taught Egyptian, and he did a fantastic job on that stone. And he had the one, like Paul says, the one who feeds the people. He came up with the one who nourishes the people. But see, Paul had come up with one who nourishes the people first, and then he changed it to feeds the people. And concerning Happy Land, the man in Florida translated it as the land of bliss. Paul deciphered it as the land of happiness. Okay, we'll take it. And I was just amazed. Now, he took 2 years to learn Egyptian glyph. He studied it for 2 hours every morning when he got up. He said he wanted to learn Egyptian glyph. He got the books, and he studied for 2 hours every morning for 2 years, and he is extremely proficient in Egyptian glyph. And to me, he blows away any of the Egyptologists. And it's a funny thing that the Egyptologists that I met have never deciphered anything in Egyptian glyph.
Oh.
And all they got to do is pick up the Dover books and read it from there. Now, I guess we're getting to the end of the show or so.
Well, yeah, we got about 10 minutes here. I wanted you real quick in a couple minutes. What about Oak Island? You had mentioned that to me. Is there Oak Island in Newfoundland, which...
There is a combat stone that appears to have an outline of Oak Island on it. And it appears that, somebody's going to have to do their research on Oak Island, but several feet down, I'm very rusty on it, there was a tablet that had Numidian script on it. I found the tablet online, printed it up for Paul. This was back in the late 90s. And Oak Island, they had reeds and coconut palms, I think. It was built, some of it was built with marble that did not come from there, came from somewhere else. Had, I think it was coconut palm bushes or something inlaid along the shore, and had this drainage system from the ocean that would fall into the pit. Quite a remarkable feat of engineering, and nobody could figure it out. And when Paul, at that time, he wasn't that familiar with Oak Island because I wasn't trying to educate him totally on it. I just had these Numidian tablets and or the script on it and gave it to him. And his decipherment of these tablets was something like, warning to you, now you will be smitten with water like fire from above.
Ooh.
Or something like that. And sure enough, what happened was they had found these Numidian tablets, they had retrieved them, and the next day when they went back out to Oak Island, the whole thing had filled up with water again from those secret tunnels. Some way, somehow, overnight, the water from the ocean as the tide had come in had pushed through these earthen barriers and just flooded that entire chamber right then. And there were several things. There were like gold trinkets, gold chains, and other things that were brought up out of the pit, the money pit, what they called the money pit. And there was a real good website on it years ago. I don't know if it's oakisland.com or moneypit.com, but all very interesting. And so that being written in Numidian characters, it was the same type of Numidian script that we have on several of these stones. And while I'm at it, we'll just reiterate, there's Egyptian glyph, Numidian, Latin, Punic, Greek, the glyph, and different variations of these. Some people call them Numidian Ancient Berber or Tamazight. There's several different names for different dialects in the area there.
So and what you're saying is with this Oak Island discoveries with the Numidian script, and again I want to remind everybody, Oak Island is in Newfoundland. So you're saying that this Numidian script, the same thing, was found in Newfoundland, just like it was written with the same characters and such in Illinois in the cave with all these.
Correct.
Wow.
We were talking, several shows back about other similarities between sites directly and indirectly related to this tomb. And it appears, as a matter of fact, somebody sent me a question, is like, well, what was the domain of Helios? And it looks like it was all the way from the coast of Canada all the way past Missouri.
Wow.
And that's a pretty big kingdom. You know,
wow.
Pretty big.
Wow. Harry, we got about 5 minutes left. Anything that you needed to get covered before we close it up for this?
Yes. I have been with you now for 8 weeks. And it is time for me to go on sabbatical. So I am not going to be with you and our producer and your audience for a few weeks. In my stead, you will have the privilege and the honor of speaking with Mr. Paul Schaffranke himself.
Oh, good, because I was going to push you to say, Harry, how come we haven't heard from Paul?
He's ready, and
excellent.
We've been planning this, and he is now working for a presentation. He is going to be sending some scans and some of his information to the producer, which he's been getting ready. He's still got another week before he comes on.
Wow.
And he's going to be sending the producer, Lynn, several things that he's going to want to put up he's going to be explaining some of the most fantastic revelations that concerning these ancient languages and concerning why so many of the scholars have been unable to break not only this ancient text but so many others. And he's going to be going into more detail concerning archaic Latin, Punic, and different things of that nature that are just going to blow your mind. So
it sounds like we're going to get educated.
I have enjoyed my 8 weeks with you, and Paul's going to be on for at least 2 weeks, maybe more, and then by then I will have my information where I want to take this show to the next level, which is the paper trail. And with any kind of remarkable find like this, even though it was rediscovered again in the early 80s, there's a massive paper trail between interoffice memos, ledger sheets of artifacts, ledger sheets of gold sales, and how much these artifacts were worth at this time, and different memos with the people involved, different scholars who came to the scene attempting to rescue this, to add their 2 bits in with this, with that, and making their discoveries through the 80s. And I'm going to be preparing for that, which is going to require me and my wonderful wife to do a lot of scanning, and we're going to get that to Lynn so that she will be able to put these up online on the video. And
wow.
a lot of these that I'm going to be sending her are featured in Book 2. Book 2 has over 80 appendices, and several of them are 5 pages long. So we're going to go through the mythical character that Russ Burroughs created concerning the landowner, and how he traumatized other people again and again and again with these mythical characters that he invented. And we're going to bring it right up to the early 90s and then continue it with this massive paper trail. And so that's why I wanted to cover the history, the artifacts, and then we're going to bring all that up. We're going to flip it into modern, contemporary times of what all happened before Paul and I, the 12, 13 years before Paul and I got involved. The people involved, the characters, and the paperwork that was left in Jack Ward's files.
Wow. Harry, we're out of time, but I can't wait. Between what
I can't either. I'm excited.
Just with Paul, and then you coming back and continuing with what you just scratched the surface on for the first 8 shows here. So can't wait. We're out of time. Harry, get yourself well. And can't wait to have you back on, but can't wait for Paul either. Then let's get both of you. We got to get both of you on at the same time as well. All right, Harry, outstanding. I can't wait. I thought this was great up to now. It's just getting better.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that's the end of Part 8 here with our special series with Harry Hubbard of Illinois Caves. You've been listening to White Owl Reports. Join us here every week. We're going to start going on 2 to 3 days a week pretty soon. So hang in there, learn, and remember, be who you were created to be. This is Michael Edward. Catch you next week.
Inform, enlighten, alive and amplified. This is the Living Light Network.
Welcome once again to the White Owl Reports, and I'm your host, Michael Edward. Today, continuing on with our special series with Harry Hubbard of IllinoisCaves.com. Today's Part 8. Every week just gets more and more exciting. All the previous discoveries of the artifacts that have come out of the Illinois Caves, or more accurately, the Illinois Tomb. And as Harry has said in our previous parts of the series, the lost tomb of Alexander the Great. Yep, sounds absurd, but that's what the tablets that have come out of this particular cave are showing, and we've discussed a lot of that already. Today, we're going to get in even more on the artifacts, which are pictured. The majority of what Harry will always talk about during this series, and has, is pictured at IllinoisCaves.com. We're also featuring films that he had done back in mid-'90s, presentations that he and his partner in all this discovery, Paul Schaffranke, fantastic linguistic translator who has broken the code, so to speak. And we've discussed all that already, so go check the past programs, but videos are on there, pictures, more than you can look at in a day. It's unbelievable. Every time I go on there, I find another little hidden spot, or it seems hidden, but they're all there. More pictures, more artifacts, just amazing. It's something to really absorb, something to get into, and if you want to find out what real history...
Trophies, prizes, gifts, rituals, we're not sure. We don't know, but they've got the handle on them. Some of them, they all fit into the hand very nicely. It's not like you get very small ones like a pocket knife. They're all like maybe 10 inches to a foot long with a nice grippy handle on them. There's also all kinds of tools and smaller utensils, many items that we don't know what they are. There's some kind of utensil for maybe rolling out some kind of food or grinding some kind of grain, or used as a cooking implement of some sort, and they are made of a different type of stone. I haven't recognized any other types of utensils that are similar to these, so that field is wide open for someone to make their own discoveries concerning what these utensils were used for. They could have been, my theory is, if you have an artifact and you don't know what it is, you don't know what its purpose was, you have no clue what it is, chances are it was a child's toy. It's the only thing that makes sense to me sometimes. A lot of artifacts from Mexico that the experts couldn't figure out what they were. Before we got involved with this, I just determined that they were some kind of kid's toy. And it kind of fit. It could be used for this and for that, entertainment. And we discussed in one show the river maps. That
is all about. Spend some time at IllinoisCaves.com. All right, well, I know Harry's on here with us. And, Harry, I wanted to get into artifacts a little bit more to coincide with what you've put in your videos and pictures. You know, you have some kind of odd artifacts in there, Harry. They're not things that I've seen on National Geographic, let's put it that way. Maybe the dolphins and the whales that we talked about last week a little bit, and the horses. But you've got ships in there. You've got some things, I think you call them ritual stones, which I look at as religious tablets of some type. Let's talk about them.
Well, dolphins are in a big presence on these artifacts. Dolphins go from the gold medallions to the black stones to the marble artifacts. There's dolphins everywhere. And how often would you find dolphins depicted on artifacts in such an artistic manner in the middle of the state of Illinois? It's not too common. And so, but there are a lot of presence with dolphins. And let me, apologize. I'm a little hoarse this week because I'm getting over a cold. But there's also a lot of whales. There's three-dimensional statues of whales. There's small carvings of whales. And some of them actually appear to be different species of whales. Now, how in the world these people, these ancient artisans, got to see these whales and carve them, they obviously carved down into the stone. So anyone perusing the website with hundreds of pictures on there, bear that in mind. Some of them are carved into the stone, and some of them are actually lifted out of the stone. And there's men, women, there's naked people in certain on certain stones. There's animals ready to mate. There's gods depicted in mating positions and stuff like this that are quite unique in character and quite well executed. It just runs all over the place there. And as far as the statues go, there's full animal statues, front, back, and all around. There's birds like chickens. There's heads of people, heads of women, heads of men, warriors. It just goes on and on. There's a plethora of daggers. And the daggers that are shown, or that I have pictures of and that I have held in my own hands, they are polished just incredibly well, just like glass. And some people in the past have called it a diorite, which is a stone evidently native to Egypt. And it's very glass-like in character, and when it polishes up, it's just absolutely beautiful. It's kind of got white, gray, and black embedded in the stone, different colors. And the ones I've held, they couldn't have, the edges aren't sharp enough to cut anything. So, and they're quite fragile, so they must have been used as knew that they blew air and water out of their spouts or snouts, however you want to pronounce it, and they must have seen them washed up on the shores in different places to carve them so accurately on these stones.
Did you have
and
a translation?
There's even scientific types of data. There's one of the stones that Paul deciphered called the Bellina tablet. It talks about, it's got a whale smiling down at the bottom of it. And so he kind of was perplexed with that, whale smiling. And the decipherment was, it's on, I think, the Isaac excerpts, is not only do whales make sounds when mating, but actually beach themselves ending their travels. Well, that's why, evidently, the whale is smiling. He's been mating. So, which is,
well, that makes sense.
yeah, kind of comical, but kind of scientific also. And there are many statues, bas-reliefs, many of the artifacts on the marble and on the black stone, the lavanya. The carving itself is lifted out of the stone. In other words, it's not carved directly into the stone, but the medium around the depiction, the artwork, is taken down, which is a different process of carving. It's quite unique and quite well executed. Some of these artifacts are just absolutely fantastic. And when you look at a picture, sometimes it's hard to tell whether they're carved in relief or